Hey everybody, welcome back to the I Play 2 podcast. I'm your host, Rob Adler. This week on the show is quarterback Trent Green. In high school, he led his team to back-to-back district championships as well as a state semifinals appearance as a junior. He went to SMU where he was the 2021 nominee for the Burlsworth Trophy, which goes to the most outstanding college football player who walked on. As a graduate transfer at Long Island University, he started 7 games and threw for nearly 1,500 yards. And now, he is playing pro football in France for the Aix-en-Provence Argonauts. His dad, Trent Green, was a 2-time Pro Bowl quarterback with the Kansas City Chiefs, and his cousin, Ben Skoranek, earned a Super Bowl ring as a member of the LA Rams. Derek, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Thank you for being here. My first question is, and it kind of sounds a little bit like a family tradition, how did you get interested in football?
Oh, gosh. As early as I can remember, my dad played in the NFL for 15 years, so I was kind of born into it. Got an older brother, 2 years older than me, TJ, Trent Jr., and I honestly just kind of followed his footsteps as I grew up. From the time I could walk, honestly, I think I probably had a football in my hand. So that's how I got into it, and then I fell in love with it from there and just been playing it ever since.
How did you and your brother decide to become quarterbacks with your dad being an all-pro quarterback?
I think it was just instinct. We definitely had our eyes open to all the different positions, but I think being a leader on the field, and whether it's physical attributes or mental attributes, it just kind of attracted both of us to it, and we took it and ran with it.
What was it like growing up in an NFL locker room and seeing all these stars that everyone wants to meet and they're just walking around as a teammate with your dad?
Very unique childhood for sure, and I definitely have a different perspective on it now after being away from it for a little bit. But as I'm living it as a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old, that's all I know. So for me, like at the time, it didn't feel special. That's just what it was. It was just dad going to work, and it was, in a way, coworkers. But it was really cool getting to be around all those guys, going to the Pro Bowl, meeting all pros, Hall of Famers, stuff like that. And now taking a step back, it really was really cool and unique. And I remember running around the locker room, running around the practice field with my brother, and keep going back to the word unique, but that's what it was, and special time in my life.
Did you make any friends with some of the teammates' kids that you still speak with today?
Gosh, we moved around so much. That was all kind of pre-social media, but Will Shields, who's in the Hall of Fame now, he had a couple boys that I remember we ran around with at the Pro Bowl in Hawaii and stay in touch with them. One of them's actually playing basketball over here in Milan, Siobhan. And then Solomon, who's the younger brother, he, I believe, is working with NFL Films now. And then other guys, Kendall Gammon was a long snapper for the Chiefs for a long time. He's got 2 boys, Blaze and Drake, who Blaze is my older brother's age, and then Drake was my age. The 4 of us were always together, whether it's training camps or whatnot. And Drake and I still go out and play golf when we can, when we're both in town. But it's tough to stay in touch with everybody, but social media definitely makes it easier.
You mentioned you moved around a lot as a kid because your dad played with a few different teams at the end of his career. How hard was it to keep resettling, keep making new friends, and that sort of thing?
At the time, I wouldn't say I was the biggest fan of it. So at one point in time, we moved 8 times in 8 years, which was really tough. Being on a new baseball team every year for 8 years in a row, it's not the best. But my family, we always stuck together and moved around together. That was something my parents decided they wanted to do. They never wanted to have us stay in Kansas City, for example, and then have my dad be gone for 9, 10 months. So I think sports was the biggest thing that made it easy, I guess. I played football, baseball, and basketball growing up. So really, whatever time of the year we moved, there was a new season coming up, and you're kind of thrown into a sports team and sort of automatically have friends, or at least people you're spending time with and can grow into becoming friends. So I think that helped a lot, made it a lot easier. But looking back, I think it's one of the greatest things I've taken from my childhood is the ability to meet new people and be surrounded by a bunch of people I've never met before and feel comfortable, don't feel overwhelmed, whether that's me moving to a new country or moving around the U.S. to different schools or to business in the future. I think that's one thing that I'll definitely take with me.
You mentioned you played basketball and baseball as well. What intrigued you about those sports, especially as you were growing up, kind of in the age of the beginning of sports specialization?
I think the team aspect of it, I think football is the ultimate team game, but I think baseball and basketball are both pretty high up there as well. I mean, it was honestly just what I enjoyed. There was never any pressure from my parents to play football. We pretty much tried everything. I played soccer, tennis, and kind of the sports we liked, we stuck with. We tried the other ones, and if we didn't enjoy them, we'd kind of be done with it. But yeah, I played a bunch of sports growing up, got into golf as well, and still love playing golf. But that's really what drew me to those three sports specifically, was the teamwork aspect of it.
You lettered in baseball. Kind of tell people about what position you played and a little bit about your baseball career.
Personally, I think I was probably better at baseball than football. I just didn't have the same love for it. I liked the games, but I just kind of dreaded going to practice and thought I'm not going to do this in college if I don't love it. So I played baseball up until senior year of high school and then specialized to just football before going to college. But for the school, I'm kind of a utility guy. I kind of played everywhere. I played in the outfield in school, so pretty much rotated around the outfield. But my summer travel team played second base. Like I said, was kind of the utility guy. So if they needed to put me in the outfield, I could do that too. But for my travel team, I think I was probably the only one on the whole team that didn't want to play college baseball, which was unique because we're going to all these showcases and traveling around the country playing baseball in front of these college coaches and stuff. But it made more sense for me to not play it my senior year. But I loved playing it, but I think everything that came with it, I decided football is kind of what I loved more, and that's what I wanted to do.
One quick follow-up. Did you have any college coaches or any heavily recruiting for baseball before you ended up just playing football your senior year?
I mean, I got like letters and stuff, but nothing I ever replied to or nothing I ever took too seriously. So it never ended up going too far. But I think if I had decided that's what I wanted to do, I could have ended up playing somewhere.
Growing up, who were some of your idols on the football field other than your dad?
I really liked watching Michael Vick play, whether it's playing with him in Madden or got to meet him at the Pro Bowl. That was really cool. Peyton Manning was another one that we always got to be around, whether it's the Pro Bowl or different events and stuff. I know, which sounds crazy saying out loud because it's pretty cool. Tony Gonzalez with the Chiefs is obviously Hall of Famer and spent a lot of time around us. Most of them kind of default to Chiefs players, but there's definitely a few other guys, mainly quarterbacks, that I would look up to.
Because Peyton Manning is more of a traditional quarterback, kind of like your dad, what intrigues you about Michael Vick's game?
He's just exciting. He was an exciting player to watch. Growing up, he was kind of the only one doing that. I know now we got Lamar Jackson and a couple other guys that are taking after his game a little bit more. But in the early, mid-2000s, it was pretty much him running the show there. It was just entertaining and exciting football to watch. It was different. I think that's kind of what drew me to watch his game more than others.
Did Tony Gonzalez ever come over to the house?
Gosh, all the guys would come by the house. Priest Holmes, Tony Richardson, all of the Hall of Fame O-linemen, Tony Gonzalez, Eddie Kennison, receiver, all sorts of guys that would come by at different times, whether it was just Halloween or different things here and there. But it was cool. Get to spend time around those guys, even though when you're 7, 8 years old, you don't completely understand it. But we've got pretty much all of the starting offense, all their jerseys in our basement signed all in a row. It's a pretty cool visual when you walk into my parents' basement.
That is pretty cool. And I like linemen having a Will Shields jersey would be awesome.
Will Shields, Willie Roaf, Casey Wigman, they had a really good O-line, really good offense. What could have been, they had a few really good years, those early 2000s, and whether it's the defense or whatever, just couldn't get it done. And now the Chiefs have obviously kind of taken into the golden era of Chiefs football. So it maybe gets overlooked now a little bit, but what they're doing now is super exciting.
Are you still a Chiefs fan, or do you kind of just follow the game in general?
I'm definitely a Chiefs fan. Well, I guess I spent the most time in Kansas City, and then we moved back there. I went to high school there. So definitely a Chiefs fan. I'll say the Rams are my second favorite, with my cousin playing there. And this would have been 2 Thanksgivings ago, Rams at Chiefs. I will admit, I was cheering for the Rams. I had on Rams gear with all my family there, and his parents and some other cousins came in. So I think that was the only time I've ever been in Arrowhead in opposing team's colors. It was a little different for sure.
Just how competitive is your family? Your dad was a pro quarterback. Your brother played in college. You have a sister going to go play volleyball in college. Your cousin. That's got to be one heck of a family gathering.
Every time we get together, there's always some sort of competition, even if it's just the five of us at my parents' house back in Kansas City, whether it could be Christmas Day, we're doing a ping pong tournament or something. There's always some sort of competition going on.
Who's the best ping pong player in the family?
Pains me to admit this, but my brother is, I'm pretty good. I'm second place for sure, but he'll get me probably 18 out of 20 times still.
I grew up with a ping pong table, and to this day, I still miss it.
It's something that I think I'll probably enjoy forever.
Who's the best athlete in the family?
Pains me to say this too, but we do say it all the time. My little sister, Janelle, who's going on to play volleyball at Cincinnati just in a couple months. She'll be a freshman there. She's a beast out there on the court. It's fun to watch.
How come you didn't say yourself? Because most of the people, when I ask that question, they're like, oh, it's me.
I mean, I would love to think that, but being realistic here, I don't know if it's having two older brothers or what, but she just dominates out there more than my brother and I did. So I got to give credit where credit's due there.
Playing quarterback in high school, what kind of mindset does it take? I had Caleb Nix on, who also played quarterback in high school, and he talked a little bit about the leadership and things like that. How long did that take you, and what was the mindset like in order to become a leader?
It's definitely part of the job, and I think it's different on an individual basis. So for me, my brother's 2 years older than me, but 3 years in school. He's real young for his grade. So he was a senior when I was a freshman. I came in to high school. He was the starting quarterback, and I was kind of the understudy. So just being around him, I got to kind of learn how he conducted himself and led his team that year, and how I could kind of learn things from that and take it and to form it into my own way. And whether it's leadership through voice or just through action and leading by example, there's no specific way to do it. There's no blueprint on this is how you do it. I think it's on an individual basis and based on how teams are constructed. It's a unique thing, but I think it's a life skill that people in football and quarterbacks specifically can take into life after ball.
Playing with your brother, were you guys able to separate, I guess, the brother relationship from the teammate relationship?
I don't know. To an extent. I mean, we played the same position, but there was really no threat to me taking his job or anything. So I feel like it was almost always a brother relationship, even on the field or in the weight room. I looked up to him like he was the greatest. So there wasn't much to defer between the two.
You also said that playing quarterback kind of translates into life skills. Could you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Well, first off, you kind of get blamed for anything that goes bad, but you also tend to get a lot of the praise when things go right. So I think whether it's your emotional reaction to things or body language, I think there's just a lot of life lessons through football, whether it's teamwork, time management, organization, working hard in general. Mainly, I think dealing with adversity is a thing that it seems like in the last however many years has become a bit more in the forefront with social media, people dealing with adversity. So I think you can learn to do that as a kid and as a high schooler and in college and post-college. It's just going to help you for the rest of your life.
You mentioned social media and being a Division I athlete. Was it ever stressed to you to perhaps not go on social media and check what people are saying about you or the team?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it would have probably been my junior year at SMU. Going in, so spring ball my junior year before that senior season, I was in a competition with Tanner Mordecai, who had just transferred in from Oklahoma, and Preston Stone, who's now the quarterback at SMU, who's a 5-star local kid coming out of high school. So 3 of us were in competition that spring lead up to that season. And I didn't delete my account, but I deleted the Twitter app, especially during spring ball, just to kind of focus on football and not worrying about what other people are saying, whether it's fans writing stuff that came due in open practice or it's the journalists that pretty much wrote stories every day about quarterback competition. So I think there's definitely an aspect of it to where at certain times you do just need to block everything out so you can really focus on what you want to focus on.
We'll get back to SMU. As a junior in high school, You led your team to the state semifinals. What was that whole kind of ride like in terms of just getting there and winning the district for the first time under your leadership?
So I actually had a pretty bad injury my junior year, second game of the season. I knew what it was, but it wasn't diagnosed. So my brother, my dad, and I all have this hereditary back injury called spondylolysis, which sounds made up, but it's pretty much a stress fracture in your vertebrae. So my dad got his in college, my brother got his in middle school, and I happened to get mine right in the middle of my junior football season. So I ended up missing most of the rest of the year, came back for the playoffs, and I wore a back brace as I would play. But by that point, the other guy had kind of taken over the lead of the team. And so he was the starter at that point. And I would come in passing situations and we would kind of rotate a little bit. But it was super unique, really not playing a few weeks leading up to the playoffs and then coming back under pretty much just limited capacity. And every time I came into the game, the other team just pretty much screaming it's a pass. It wasn't easy, but it's part of the journey that I've had. So as far as getting the team to the state semifinals, I wouldn't necessarily say I led the team there, but whether it was just battling through adversity and coming back to play or the actual play I had on the field to help us get to that point, I feel like it helped, but it was a fun experience. So for the seniors to be able to do that and get that far, it was really cool.
I'm going to have a word with the SMU Media Guide people when we're done over that.
The wording can be interesting in the different biographies for the different teams.
Talking about the injury here, could you kind of tell people a little bit about the rehab process and how that injury, even afterwards, can kind of linger?
I had 2 fractures in my vertebrae, my L4 and L5 vertebrae. And it, like I said, it's pretty much a stress fracture that for me and for my brother too, sort of came on from back squatting. So putting however many pounds on your back, and really your back just isolates all the weight pretty much onto different hot spots. So that's sort of how I think mine came about. I had the option to have surgery, but they told me I'd never be able to play football again. Or they said you can take 2 months off, kind of let it settle down a little bit and wear a back brace and just kind of see how it goes from there. So I opted for that. So I did not have surgery, wore a back brace for 6 months. But really, the only thing you can do from that point on is core strength and flexibility, like stretching, just to take tension off your back. So I was doing a lot of core and ab exercises, and then hamstring stretches is kind of the main thing too, as far as taking the stress off your back. So to this day, I really focus on those things, whether it's hip flexors and hamstrings and core work, just to kind of keep your core strong so everything's not loaded on your back. And that's kind of where I'm still at today with it. I haven't really had any issues with it, but I do still have my back brace in case it does flare up.
And you lift weight at all? I was curious if you could actually lift weights again.
In the weight room, I still can't back squat and won't back squat the rest of my life. So whether it's like a pit shark machine or I can front squat up to like a certain weight before it starts hurting a little bit. Certain deadlifts definitely aren't good for my back. There's certain adjustments I definitely had to make once I got to college, especially. They did a great job adjusting. Strength coaches knew how to work around it and get the work in that we needed to.
Having a back issue and playing quarterback, you kind of leave yourself exposed there. What was it like to, I guess, get hit from behind, and how did that affect your back and your ability to recover?
The rest of that year, I did wear the back brace, and then I had a back plate on my pads, and then I also had like a rib protector that came around. So I was pretty well padded up for that. I also had like a heat pack that I would keep underneath my brace just to like keep the muscles warm, just because when I came back, it was fall in the Midwest. So it's starting to get a little colder. That was for that year. And then the next year, pretty much same thing. I wore the brace for the games. Other than that, it was just a back plate to give extra protection. And that's kind of all I've done since, is just wear the back plate and a rib protector.
You mentioned fall in the Midwest, and Kansas City can have some pretty brutal winters. What's it like to play quarterback in a snowstorm?
Well, I haven't had anything too crazy. In Missouri, the playoffs go until that weekend after Thanksgiving. So we never went into December. So I never had a terrible snowstorm experience, but growing up, there was definitely games that snowed in at some point, or just cold weather in general. It's such a big difference when you're actually playing and your blood circulating and all that. You're kind of locked into the game. You're not really thinking about it, but when you're not playing, when you're the backup quarterback, for example, like I was at SMU, whether we were playing at UConn or playing at somewhere else cold towards the end of the season, it definitely feels a lot colder when you're not playing.
Speaking of SMU, what was the recruiting process like for you, and how did you end up as a Mustang?
This is a pretty wild story. So going into Christmas Eve of my senior year, so this would have been 2017, was heading to a Chiefs game. I had a handful of preferred walk-ons to a few schools, hadn't made any decisions. And so we're heading to this game, Christmas Eve. It's me, my parents, and my sister. And parents run into somebody they know. And as we know, SMU is very well known for their boosters and especially athletically donations and whatnot. So I don't know anything about SMU really. I hadn't looked into it. And Michael Merriman is a SMU alum who's a Kansas City guy, but has also given a lot to the SMU athletic community. So my parents know him just from being around Kansas City, and they've got a great suite right on the 50-yard line. And so they invite us in for a while, and he's talking to me and, what are your plans? What are you doing? And so he knew I played quarterback at Rockhurst in Kansas City. And he says, well, if you can play quarterback at Rockhurst, you can play quarterback at SMU. And I was like, okay, like I don't really know what that means. But so Christmas Eve, he sends a text to Kurt Potcotter, who's I think the assistant AD, and says, hey, I got this guy. You need to send it to the coaches and have them take a look. And Sonny Dykes had just gotten hired at SMU and that whole staff. So brand new staff. He's like, get it in front of the new coaches. We need this guy. So I'm obviously at a loss of words. And he replies within 10 minutes. Hey, yeah, that's great. I'll send it on. Merry Christmas. So I ended up getting in contact with those coaches. They reached out to me, took a visit there in January, February, I forget. And then I had a visit to Pitt, University of Pittsburgh, the week before. So I did official visits both places. And it came down to SMU and Pitt, and decided SMU was the best fit for me for a few reasons. Obviously, football was a big reason for what school I was going to choose, but also academically, I knew I wanted to study finance, and SMU's got a great business school. And then it came down to Dallas and Pittsburgh. Where do I want to live? And postgraduate opportunities, networking, all that sort of thing. Couldn't be happier with my decision. So that's how I ended up there.
I was going to say Dallas winner versus Pittsburgh winner. That would make the decision for me.
My two visits back-to-back weeks in Pittsburgh, it snowed all 3 days in January. And in Dallas, I think it was in the 60s all 3 days. So that also helps.
You mentioned you had your degree in finance. What intrigued you about finance and the Cox School of Business at SMU that won you over?
Well, first off, I just like numbers more than words, I think. So I knew I wanted to get into some sort of math or business. So started taking the undergrad curriculum prerequisites to get into Cox and decided finance was kind of what I wanted to go into. Liked management. And there's a commercial real estate kind of degree you can get at SMU as well. But I also didn't have a specific dream job outside of football. So I knew finance kind of would keep it broad enough for me to explore a few different things once I got out of college. It wouldn't limit my opportunities.
Once you got to SMU, you had various quarterback competitions. Can you tell people what it's like when you're going from high school and the adjustment to college and the level and quality of player that you're now competing against?
It's completely different, especially when you come in as a walk-on, you're bottom of the barrel there. So I think I was 7th string going into my first fall camp. And whether this is getting off topic of your question, but I set goals for what I wanted to accomplish every year. So I knew I wasn't going to go in and play as a freshman, right? Especially as a walk-on. So my goal was to make the travel squad. So worked my way up to, I guess it would have been 4th string that freshman year. So ended up getting to travel. Big reason was we played at Michigan. So got to go to the big house that year. Back to your question, I guess it's completely different, especially compared to football in Missouri, where we don't have spring ball like they do in Texas high schools. Everything's just a lot faster. Mentally, physically, it was a different step that I definitely needed some time to adjust to. But that freshman year, like I said, I made the travel squad, but I was the scout team quarterback. So that was like the best thing that could have happened for me. So I got to go against the starting defense for a whole season and kind of get used to the speed of the game. And I think that's really what helped me elevate my game, was being a scout team quarterback.
What was it like just setting foot in the big house in Ann Arbor?
Oh, awesome. It was awesome. I think there was 114,000 people there, a sea of maize and blue. And then there's a little pocket of red up in the corner. It was really cool. Something I'll definitely never forget.
I've been to the big house, but never for a game. And the thing that I love most about that stadium is half of it is actually built underground.
Yeah, it's just so wide too. Like it just seems like it goes on forever. Other stadiums, whether it's Kyle Field at A&M or whatever other stadium, it seems like it's built pretty vertically. And the big house, this just expands so much. It's a cool sight to see for sure.
While you were in college, SMU and Ford Stadium aside, where was your favorite place to be a part of and step on the field?
I will say the loudest stadium we played at was UCF. Central Florida was really cool. We played there the same year we played at Michigan, and I think it was louder than Michigan. They've got these metal bleachers that go all the way around the stadium. So just the noise they made, and they were right on top of you as opposed to the big house being all spread out. So I think Central Florida was one of the coolest stadiums. I'll say this, it was great playing at TCU. I liked their facilities, but it's even better when you go 2-0 at their place. So never had a bad experience at TCU. And that's a fun stadium to play in, especially when you're winning. But one I'm really bummed about was my senior year. We were supposed to play in the Fenway Bowl, which SMU ended up playing in this year. So would have got to play at Fenway Park in Boston. But sadly, that did not happen with COVID. So that's one I really do wish we could have got in.
I got two follow-ups on that. And the first one is SMU and TCU play for the Iron Skillet for listeners that don't know. Could you kind of talk about that rivalry and just how big of a rivalry it is in the Metroplex?
It's got a lot of history, but as far as I know, this is going to be the last year of it, this upcoming season, until it gets renewed at some point. But it's the game you've got circled on your calendar every season. Usually it's our fourth week of the season, so each team gets a few games to warm up before it. My freshman year, they came in to SMU and beat us pretty good. And then my sophomore year, we went over there to their place, beat them, took the Iron Skillet back. And then my junior year, they canceled because of COVID. We tried rescheduling, didn't happen. And then my senior year, we went back and beat them again. So got them twice while I was there. And it's definitely an exciting game. The schools are so close to each other that it's usually a pretty packed stadium with both colors. And it's just an exciting atmosphere to play in.
Yeah, I was at the 2018 game. We won't talk about that.
We can talk about the other two.
The other thing is you mentioned COVID canceling the Fenway Bowl. What other impacts did COVID have on you, especially being a student and now having to go virtual and things like that?
It was super interesting would be the word to use. We pretty much had something football every day. You're supposed to have some sort of day off for that, but whether it was the COVID test in the morning or weights in the morning or meetings or something, we had something kind of every day to keep us involved with the team somehow. At a certain point, that just wears you down mentally. I think I counted, we took 68 COVID tests up the nose during that 2020 season. It took a toll on everybody physically, mentally, and whether you got COVID or not, just being around it and all the different precautions and different things that had to be put in place to protect us against it. We had separate workout times. We had specific groups practicing at different times. We couldn't eat meals together. Everything was to go. Obviously, those things had to be implemented for everyone's safety, but it definitely took a toll on everybody. It made college go by really fast, kind of having what felt like a year go by in the snap of a finger.
When the initial lockdown happened in March, how did you end up getting back home and how were you able to stay sharp and keep working out and stuff like that?
So we were actually on spring break when it happened. We had 3 practices of spring ball, and then we went on spring break. So I was with 3 other teammates down in Florida, and they had told us beforehand, we're kind of hearing rumors, but we don't know anything. Like, be prepared to be gone for an extended period of time. So we're like, okay, we don't really know what that means. And then while we're in Florida, we got the text, hey, 2 extra weeks, don't come back to campus. So sort of a 3-week spring break. And we're thinking, okay, awesome. It's great. And then that turned into, okay, stay home indefinitely. So we worked our way back to Dallas and got our things and went our separate ways. So I went back to Kansas City for the remainder of that year. We did Zoom meetings as a team, positional meetings, and then workout-wise, the strength coaches did a great job giving us at-home workouts, whether it's using household items around the house. For guys on the team that didn't have access to weights or to a gym, they came up with some pretty unique ideas as far as whether it's using water jugs or books or anything else to get resistance. And then From a throwing aspect, my brother was back in Kansas City as well. So me and him and my dad would go to the park behind our house, and we'd throw there a couple times a week, and we'd get our running in. A very unique time frame that I'll definitely never forget.
Because your brother had gone to Northwestern, you were at SMU. What was it like to kind of just be around family again?
My brother and I's schedules usually didn't sync up. He'd have a bye week and I'd have a bye week. They were usually never the same week. So we really didn't get the five of us together very often once he went off to college. So that was super special, I think, especially with my sister, being she's 6 years younger than me and 8 years younger than my brother. So we were both off to college and she hadn't even started high school yet. So for us being able to come back and spend an extended period of time together, I think was really special for our relationship with her to grow a bond together that we necessarily might not have had if we didn't get to spend that extra time together. So it was a blessing in disguise, I think, having the five of us together for an extended period there.
Going back to on-field at SMU, and hopefully the media guy didn't lie to me on this one either. You were the holder on field goals and extra points. Could you describe kind of the role of the holder in terms of not just holding the ball, but the communication with the line and things like that?
It's definitely an undervalued, underappreciated spot on the team, but it's integral. Nobody really bats an eye when you do well, but when you mess up, you're going to hear about it. So luckily for me, I never had a mess up during my 2 seasons holding. But the specialists, the kickers, punters, long snappers have a very unique relationship. They're always together, whether they're lifting together or just practicing together or outside of football, they're always together as well. So being a quarterback, but then also doing that, I kind of got a peek into their life, which was cool. Got to build better relationships with more guys on the team. And for me, that would have been my junior year. Shane Buechele was still the guy at SMU, so I knew I wasn't going to be playing. So for me, it was really any way I could get on the field. We'd just gotten new special teams coach, and he came up to me and he's like, "Have you ever held?" I was like, "Yeah, I was the holder in high school too." So he's like, "All right, I'm gonna throw you out there, see what you can do," because we always had the punter hold it. So must have liked what I did, and that's kind of how I worked my way onto the field. And then senior year, I was super focused on being the quarterback and being the starting quarterback, so I kind of put that to the back burner. Didn't really focus much on it during spring ball or summer, and then going into fall camp. Once the job ended up being decided to go to Tanner Mordecai, they came and asked me again to be the holder. And I was obviously not super excited about it because I wanted to be the one leading the team out there at quarterback. But if it would help the team win, I was willing to do it. Into that aspect, I feel like I've kind of done all the jobs on a football team. I've done the signals, held personnel signs, scout team quarterback, been backup quarterback. Once I got to Long Island, I'm sure we'll get into, then I was finally the starter.
When you were holding up the personnel signs, and some teams have some pretty bizarre ones, what was your favorite or weirdest sign to hold up?
We had a bunch of former players, whether it was Cortland Sutton or James Prochet, and we'd have different colors, red, black, blue, green, whatever. Honestly, in sort of a similar way, I did dummy signals as well. We'd have two quarterbacks signaling. So sometimes I'd just like make up a dance move or a hand gesture or something, and I would act like that was a play call and hope that the other team, if they're looking, would think that it was. So I'm sure there's funny pictures and videos of signalers doing some dumb things while they're signaling plays in. But I had to draw a line to where I didn't want to end up on not top 10, but also have some fun with it.
How good are your dance moves?
I didn't make it on Not Top 10 or Come On Man or any of those segments, so I guess they weren't too bad. Or nobody caught it on camera, one of the two.
So you didn't win the job as a senior, and then you decide as a graduate transfer to head to Long Island University. Where were you looking to go initially? Was even being a graduate transfer even in your thought process before you ended up at Long Island? Coach
Garrett Riley was the OC, and he called me in his office and said, "We're going with Tanner. I think he did a great job, did everything we asked you to in camp, everything you don't really want to hear." But he's like, "We'll see how the first game goes, and we'll go from there." Well, the first game, Tanner went out and threw 7 touchdown passes. So from that point on, I kind of knew I wasn't going to be there the next year. I wanted to play, and Tanner had another year of eligibility, so I knew he was coming back. So I knew pretty much from that point on that after the season, I was going to be looking at grad transfer somewhere. I ended up choosing Long Island. Like I said, I studied finance as an undergrad, and I wanted to get my MBA, and then I thought Long Island, 30 minutes from Wall Street, and I kind of thought that would be my future. And it didn't end up that way. I ended up coming overseas to play.
One final question here on SMU. How are you able to separate being a teammate and also being a friend with somebody like Tanner Mordecai or Shane Buechele?
Once the competition was over, we actually got a lot closer. During the competition, we're friendly, but I'm also competing with the guy, and I want to do better than him. And it wasn't his decision, it was the coach's decision. So I'm not upset with him. It wasn't his fault. So Tanner and I actually became super close. We did stuff together off the field too, played golf together a bunch. I think our relationship actually grew more as the season went on. I think there was a respect factor between the two of us. So we're still friends to this day.
Well, that's good to hear, because sometimes the competitions that can breed a little bit of jealousy and being envious and create bigger issues.
It did help that we sort of had mutual friends. So we were kind of running around together. We had very similar interests, and we were able to separate football and life.
You get to Long Island, you're in another quarterback competition, and you win it. What's it like, that feeling of being named starter for week one?
It's exciting. Once that decision was made that I was going to be the guy, it was really trying to get the guys ready. As an FCS school, we were playing Toledo week one, which being an FBS school in the MAC, we're supposed to beat us by a bunch, and they ended up doing that. But that's what I went there to do. I went there to play.
For someone who's never done this like me, what's it like to throw that first touchdown pass in college?
Oh, it is such a weight off the shoulders. A lot of my playing time at quarterback at SMU was backup duty at the end of the games. So getting able to actually be out there and kind of brings you back to high school a little bit, but it's on a bigger scale. It's very cool, something I'll never forget for sure.
Would you mind kind of taking me through that play?
Week two, we played Villanova at home. It was right before halftime. We had the ball down in the red zone. It was just a little rollout, little bit of a pick play with the outside guy running a slant, and then the inside guy kind of running a flat, hoping the defender kind of gets lost in there. And that's what happened. So rolled out to the right, and then kind of had to throw it back inside a little bit to him. Kind of sat down and found a spot in the end zone. And yeah, I'll never forget it.
As that season was coming to a conclusion, what was the future holding for you at quarterback? Did you think that maybe you could play in the CFL or somewhere else? And how did you end up making the decision to go overseas?
Well, going into the season, I had 2 years of eligibility left because redshirt and COVID. So I had 2 years I could do. I didn't really love my time there, and the season wasn't necessarily going as I had hoped it would. So I felt like I was done, but then got an opportunity to come play in Italy. So got an opportunity to go play overseas, which I did not even know was a possibility. I knew NFL Europe used to exist, and that used to be a thing, but I didn't really know how that all worked. So that was never my plan until towards the end of that year when the opportunity came about, and thought about it for a few weeks, but I didn't have long to think about it because the season was over in November and I was off to Italy in January. So I didn't have long, but super happy with my decision to keep playing overseas.
My first ever podcast was with Adam Bledsoe, Drew's brother, who also played quarterback in the Italian league. Could you kind of tell people about football in Italy and what it's like to play there?
Oh, it is a completely different game. And I will say my parents recommended me reading this book called Playing for Pizza, which if you read it, it's a pretty spot on account of what it's like to play football and live as an American football player in Italy. I'll tell you what, it's fun. It's sort of a little bit like backyard football, but it's more structured, but it's definitely just a lot more free than playing in college. So it's different from an athletic standpoint. The guys aren't as big and they haven't been playing football as long over here. So it's a bit of an adjustment. I'm there for a month and a half before the season, sort of in a camp mode, practicing with the team and trying to teach them everything I can about my experience back in America and how I can bring some of those skills and aspects to them. You can only have a certain number of imports for the team. So most of the team was Italians. And then it was myself as an American import. And then we had a DB from San Francisco as our other imports. So you can have 2 Americans and then you can bring in some other Europeans to play. But other than that, it's homegrown players. It's a unique experience. as I've said about most of my life so far, I'm super happy with my decision to come, which led to me coming back one more year to play here in France.
From a communication standpoint, was the language Italian or did you communicate in English?
A little bit of both. In Italy, I would say 75% of the team was pretty fluent in English. Our whole coaching staff was Italian, so when they would address the team after practice or during practice or at games and whatnot, it would be in Italian. So in that, I never really knew what was being said, and I would just kind of lean over to a teammate that was bilingual and kind of have them translate for me. But the plays were all in English, which was super nice because there's really nothing you can do if they're trying to ask me something in Italian and I don't speak Italian.
What was it like, just the transition of going from the US to Italy? Did all your moving around as a kid kind of help you get more easily familiar quicker?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely on a much bigger scale when you're in a different country and you don't speak the language. But I think that just helps me even more. I think those moving around within the States a bunch as a kid were just kind of stepping stones to be able to do that and move by myself across the world. I think now I can go back to the States and feel comfortable in just about any situation.
Away from the field in Italy, what was your favorite part about just being a tourist and going to go see the country?
That was my favorite part. I did get to just be a tourist pretty much. We had 9 games over the span of 12 weeks. So we had a few bye weeks during the season, got to travel around a bunch. And I lived in Bologna, Italy, which is dead smack in the middle between Milan and Florence. So right in the middle of the country. And it's sort of the train hub for the country. So I could get anywhere. I could get to Rome, Florence, Venice, could go to Lake Como. I could walk to the train station from my apartment. And then within 3 hours, I could be in Rome. It was just a super cool experience that not many people get to live. So definitely tried to soak it all in.
I'm just jealous because you got to have all the homemade pasta you could eat.
Oh, every day almost. Even in the grocery stores, they're making fresh pasta every day that I could just buy. That was also different. The way we buy groceries in the States in bulk versus over here, they kind of go to the market or the grocery store every day and get what they need. So it's very fresh.
Was there a favorite city or maybe restaurant from your time in Italy that if you ever get a chance to go back, you'll go back?
Where I live, Bologna is the food capital of Italy, which was awesome. So Bolognese, pasta, and meat sauce is the main dish there. So I probably ate that at least once a week. Lasagna, pizza was amazing. I think you can pretty much go anywhere and you'll enjoy what you're eating there.
Homemade bolognese once a week. I'm going to throw a flag for taunting on you for that.
I know it. It's going to be tough when I come back home.
So how did you end up in France from Italy?
I had just planned on only playing the 1 year overseas, but midway through the season, I'm sitting here and I'm like, this is amazing. All my friends are working real jobs now and I'm playing football and traveling Italy. I've got to do it again. Decided I'd buy myself another year before reality. So was in contact with a few different teams, a few different countries, and decided south of France wouldn't be too bad of a place to live for 6 months. Got in touch with their coaches and ownership, and that's how I ended up here.
I know Germany and Poland have high-end American football leagues. What intrigues you, I guess, more about France than over those countries?
Could have gone and played in Germany. But for me, it honestly came down to what was my goal and knowing that this was going to be my last year. I've kind of come to the realization and accepted the fact that this will be it for me. So for me, it was about living somewhere amazing and just having a great life experience. And that's what I found here in Aix-en-Provence and getting to travel all across the French Riviera and to Spain and to all these places that I'd never been to.
Did you make the Cannes Film Festival?
I have not. I was there, I guess, 2 weeks ago. My grandparents came in and visited, and we went to Nice, Cannes, and Monaco. And then my family was here a little over a month ago. And we kind of hit similar places. So I have seen it. I've seen the red carpet, but I didn't see all the A-list actors walking up it.
You mentioned Monaco. What was it like to see Monte Carlo?
It's beautiful. Definitely lives up to the hype. So I recently got into Formula One, the Drive to Survive series on Netflix. So I was super interested in it once I got to go there. And it's really tough to explain the $100 million yachts that are in the port there. And then the high-rise condos looking over everything. And the track goes right through the city in Monte Carlo. We stopped in the casino for a little bit, had to check it out. Very blessed to have the opportunity to go places like that and check them out.
You mentioned the Netflix series Drive to Survive, and I just had Adeline Flack on the show who also mentioned that series. What intrigued you about the series and made you a Formula One fan?
I couldn't have told you the first thing about it prior to watching the series. And I think the first one I watched was the Full Swing golf documentary on Netflix, which is sort of similar, kind of goes into the people's lives, but then also is up to date with the events that are going on in the sports world too. So I knew it was sort of a similar documentary to that. And it was just a sport that I really didn't know much about. So I gave it a try and actually really enjoyed what I saw. So that's kind of how I got into it. But then, yeah, actually getting to stand across the finish line in Monte Carlo was really cool, as all these supercars and super yachts are right there. It was pretty neat.
You have a favorite F1 racer at the moment?
Obviously, Max Verstappen is killing it, but don't necessarily have a favorite. I would like it if he didn't win every time. That way it's a little more interesting as the season goes on, but I don't have a favorite per se. Just like look into how the teams are managed and the drivers are competing with each other, even though they're on the same team. It's still a team sport, but it's also individually, and how they work with the dynamic there. And it's honestly sort of similar to a quarterback competition, I think, as each team has two drivers and they're competing with each other, but they also want to win the team championship as well as the individual one. So I just think the whole dynamic of it is really cool. And I've always been into cars. Even as a little kid, I loved cars. So I think that's kind of what drew me.
You mentioned as a kid you were really into cars. What's your dream car?
Well, my grandfather, he had a Porsche, a little convertible that he used to drive me and my brother around in when we would go visit him. So that's kind of, I think, how I first got interested in them. And then I was always a Hot Wheels kid, so I had the little Hot Wheels cars and racetracks and stuff. But dream car, gosh, I don't know. There's too many. If I just picked one, I feel like there'd always be another one I'd want. So if I ever get to that point where I have that ability, it'll be a very tough decision.
So are you saying 30 years down the road, when you do get to that point, you're going to have a collection like Jay Leno?
Hopefully that becomes an issue for me. That'd be a good problem to have if I don't know which supercar to buy.
It probably means he might have a place in Monte Carlo as well.
That would be awesome. That would be amazing.
You mentioned that this was your last year playing football. What does the future hold for Derek Green?
I took the few months I had off between Italy and France to go home to Kansas City, and was back in my parents' house and was doing interviews and networking. So putting the finance degree to use. I'll be starting work in July back in Kansas City at a finance firm. So the real world's going to set in for me, but I do think I'll still be able to stay related to football in an aspect. The company I'll be working for is dealing with sports and entertainment clients. So hopefully that'll keep me related to this game that I've played my whole life to at least some point, but it's also real life and get to use my degree a little bit too.
Is there any thought down the road of becoming a potential sports agent?
I have thought about that, and I would definitely not count it out. I think it's probably just something I haven't looked into enough.
So in 10 years, where do you see yourself?
Oh, man. Gosh. Still trying to figure out the next 10 weeks. In 10 years, I'd hopefully find a wife and would like a couple kids. But as far as career-wise, I think where I will be working at here coming up shortly, I think that'll kind of tell me a lot as far as what the next 10 years could look like career-wise, if that's something I want to continue to build and grow what I'm doing there, or if I want to try something new. So I can't really tell you a precise answer, but I just hope that I can be happy.
Last question here, and I didn't work it in during our SMU conversation, is how much do you miss Snuffers cheese fries?
So I had actually not been to Snuffers until my senior year. How crazy is that?
How did you not go until your senior year? Did you never go to a concert and do a post-concert cheese fries run?
Exactly. I'm going to use COVID as an excuse. Freshman year, didn't know, but then sophomore year and junior year, I don't think would have really been much of an option. But senior year, I definitely took advantage of it. And the place is amazing and should have found out about it earlier. Should have talked to you earlier.
Derek, I want to thank you so much for joining the I Play 2 podcast today, talking about your stories on the gridiron, playing in Europe, and possibly what the future holds for you. Best of luck, man, and I appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you, Rob. It's been an honor just to kind of share my story and hopefully answer any questions or help anybody else that's listening out there.